Available seasonally at Specs. Details at specsonline.com. Cheers to savings.
Cloudy today, upper 70s for the high, upper 60s for the low tonight. And a really good chance of rain for Friday and Saturday. Some of it could be stormy, so keep it here for the latest. And then sunshine Sunday and Monday back into the mid-80s. Right now, we're at 68 on the beach in Galveston, 66 here at the University of Houston. Winds out of the north at 13 miles an hour. Earlier action up on the north, Sam westbound JFK cleared out of the way. It's moving much better. Also, East Texas Freeway's northbound service road to Lauder, they cleared one. KUHF Houston News 88.7. A service of the University of Houston, streaming live online. Stick around. Houston Matters starts right now, 9 o'clock.
Houston City Council has approved an ordinance cracking down on apartment complexes with chronic health and safety violations. I'm Michael Haggerty in for Craig Cohen, and today on Houston Matters, we learn what the ordinance does and get some reaction.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, don't kill the messenger here, but we are just a few weeks away from another hurricane season. We find out what one forecast predicts and discuss how forecasts like it get made and how they actually tend to play out for our region. Plus, on a new installment of The Bigger Picture, we learn about Tourette Syndrome and a new documentary about the condition. And we'll preview this weekend's Houston debut of Panda Fest, which celebrates Asian food and culture. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7, and remember to check out our live video feed on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Stocks open mixed this morning as McDonald's reported better than expected earnings for the first few months of the year. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped about 50 points in early trading.
McDonald's has been wooing cost-conscious customers with a new $3 value menu, as well as a discount breakfast meal for $4. The fast food giant says sales at its existing restaurants rose during the first quarter by 3.8%. Crude oil prices have come down a bit on hope snarled tanker traffic in the Strait of Hormuz could start flowing soon. Retail gasoline prices, however, continue to climb. AAA says the average price of regular gas rose 2 cents overnight to about $4.56 a gallon. New applications for unemployment benefits rose last week as 200,000 people applied for aid. We'll get a more complete picture of the U.S. job market tomorrow when the Labor Department issues its monthly jobs report. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Campaign staffers bet on their own candidates and made thousands of dollars on prediction markets. As NPR's Luke Garrett reports exclusively, these staffers use inside campaign information to bet with an edge and win big.
Two campaign staffers granted anonymity for fear of retribution said the method is simple. Campaign staffers would get an unreleased poll, use it to buy advantageous event contracts, and then sell their contracts once the poll was released and their contract price soared. One staffer admitted to doing this themselves. They won thousands, and their bet was verified by prediction market data reviewed by NPR. Current law bars prediction market bettors from using insider information to make money. But former commissioner at the Commodities Future Trading Commission, Kristen Johnson, doubted that the agency could police, quote, election positions. These bets raise serious questions about how campaign operatives can turn private information into a quick payday amid an unsettled legal landscape for prediction markets. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
There is new research on cell phone bans in schools across the United States and their effectiveness. More than 2/3 of states have implemented some type of restrictions. NPR's Sequoia Carrillo reports on the latest findings for the National Bureau of Economic Research.
This week's study found that states with restrictions saw dramatically reduced cell phone activity in schools. Teachers reported that the number of students using cell phones in class dropped on average from 61% to just 13%. On the other hand, the research found that the bans had a, quote, close to zero effect on test scores. But Thomas Dee, a professor of economics at Stanford and a co-author on this study, characterized this research as the first draft of a new approach to schooling. Even though these bans are very popular with teachers and across party lines, this is new territory. Sequoia Carrillo, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down about 22 points. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. A teenager charged for an alleged plot to attack a Houston area synagogue is due in court today. Harris County authorities say the 16-year-old has been communicating with an 18-year-old in North Carolina, orchestrating the threat against Temple Beth Israel. The situation forced the synagogue to close its doors early that day and send kids at a day school home early. The local 16-year-old has been in custody since their arrest. Multiple law enforcement agencies across Texas and North Carolina worked to stop that threat. Meanwhile, local authorities have executed a search warrant at the home of Lee Gilley, who fled the country, attempting to avoid his capital murder trial for the death of his pregnant wife. Multiple outlets report that Gilley obtained fake passports that got him to Canada, and he was held up in Milan, though, and detained with immigration authorities. Gilley's home in the Heights was searched yesterday. Police believe he used a fake passport with Belgium identification in order to exit the country. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has issued an order requiring cleanup to begin at the San Jacinto River waste pits. Our Natalie Weber tells us the order comes after years of delays.
Jackie Medcalf has been advocating for cleanup of the site for more than a decade. She's the executive director of the Texas Health and Environment Alliance, a nonprofit organization she founded after suffering health problems from drinking toxic well water at her family's home near the San Jacinto River. At a press conference Wednesday, Medcalf praised the EPA's order.
This is a big win for our community and for the years of work and persistence that brought us to this very moment.
The waste pits were designated as a Superfund site in 2008. International Paper Company and McGinnis Industrial Maintenance Corporation are responsible for cleanup of the site. I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
The companies responsible for the cleanup said in a statement they continue to cooperate with the EPA. Overcast skies right now, currently 66 degrees here on the UH campus, and will climb up to 79 later this afternoon. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, filling in for Craig Cohen. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, what the forecast for hurricane season says and how often it really plays out that way. Plus, understanding Tourette Syndrome, which is portrayed in a new film, and previewing this weekend's Panda Fest, which showcases Asian food and culture from a wide array of countries. But first, as you've been hearing on News 88.7, the Houston City Council yesterday approved an ordinance cracking down on apartment complexes with chronic health and safety violations. Here to help us understand the new ordinance and to offer some reaction on what it does is Julia Orduña, Southeast Regional Manager, or Director, I should say, for Texas Housers. Julia, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thanks for having me.
Can you explain for those of us who haven't been following super closely what this ordinance does?
Yeah, it supports having healthy living in Houston and healthy apartments. So looking at the Houston building code, and particularly the building codes on neighborhood and protection and multifamily habitability code. And what it does is attempts to get properties that have repeated violations in health, safety, and sanitation to be able to focus on those issues and really bring those properties up to code so people are living in healthy conditions.
Can you walk us through a little bit of just how it goes about doing that then?
Sure. So what the city of Houston was attempting to do is amend their ordinance and amend their laws that really define how Houston Public Works and Solid Waste and Fire Department and Health Department come and inspect these multifamily properties. When we're talking about multifamily, we're defining having 3 units or more. So these quadplexes or 100-unit properties. And sometimes they have different violations, code violations. And so if there is a property that has multiple violations over a standard time, they will flag this property and start talking to the property, ask them to do a training, do a registration, and attempt to get them into a repair and remediation of all of these violation issues. So the habitability of the property and the livelihood, the quality of life for the tenants living there is improved.
How did they end up getting on this list or getting warnings? Is it residents reporting problems, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and so in the wonkiness of what is building codes and property code, so we have Chapter 10 is the building and neighborhood protections. In there's Article 4, which is the multifamily habitability code. We already had the standard of what is the usual inspection process that was adopted in 2009. And so when a multifamily property comes online, they have to register with the city of Houston. An inspector comes out and ensures that the property looks good. And the Houston Fire Department has a cycle of every 4 years. They come back and just make sure that the property's in good conditions. But throughout those 4 years, things happen. So usually what happens is that someone may call 311, which is an intake line for the city of Houston to, I usually call if there's a pothole or if there's a water leak, but you can also call and say there's nuisance in or around my property, there's illegal dumping, there's pests, there's habitability conditions, there's holes in my wall, things like that, that if there's a property or an issue within your property, either in your unit or on the property, someone can call. And so that alerts these departments that take care of these different divisions to say, hey, we might need someone to go and inspect this issue. So someone goes and inspects, and if there is a concern, they will give a notice. And so, hey, property manager or owner, can you please fix this issue? And if they don't fix the issue, then a violation is issued. And so then we can start imposing fines. And what is now being amended is there's a new division in this article, which is the high-risk rental building program. And so that is what we were adding and what the city council passed yesterday. And so what that is written is that if you get 10 citations in a span of 6 months, then you would have to register for this program. And in registering, you would have to have additional inspections. You may have to remedy these violations on a certain timeline based on what the building code officer asks. And then once you remedy that, you'll have to stay in compliance for 6 months. And once you have met all those requirements, then the property will be able to be terminated from the program. And hopefully the living conditions will improve.
This is, if I understand correctly, the first year will kind of be a pilot program, and then it'll expand beyond the first year. How will it start off and then change as we go forward?
Yeah, so what we've heard from the city of Houston and the departments is they're going to start with about 12 properties. They have been looking at the numbers through the 311 data and through the code violations data to really see where is the biggest impact that they can have right now. We know that the city of Houston has different number of inspectors depending on departments, and there are about 6 different departments that touch different code violations. So everyone has to work together. And so they're going to start with 12 properties. We have heard that some city councils might want to see that number come up to about 25. And also, if we can graduate some of these properties, can we bring another property in? So the city has identified who those high-risk properties are, and we'll start with that pilot program. We've also heard that they will come back and reevaluate within a year, but I hope to see progress reports along the way. Maybe we can hear some progress quarterly. We've also heard that there will be an online report, and hopefully we'll see all that roll out. They can iron out all those kinks, and then once everything's smooth sailing and we understand how this will work, everything that they have written into the ordinance will start ramping up.
This has been like a year or so process getting this passed. I mean, just what's your general reaction to what got passed and the fact that it got passed?
Yeah, I think there was always support for something like this. We know when we're living here in Houston, we are a majority renter city at this point. And a lot of our housing is aging infrastructure. We have older apartments that become what we know as NOAA housing, which is naturally occurring affordable housing. And so these rents are lower because these properties are becoming Class C and D apartments. And so the quality of the apartments may just be coming down in condition, or because of these compounding disasters, our property owners really don't have the time and the capital to keep up with those repairs. So I think that that's really going to illuminate some of these things. It's never been a discussion of if this was necessary. It was just about how this needed to happen. And so since this was coming out of Proposition A last May, it was unanimously voted out. And so we saw the ordinance come to the city agenda in October, and I think there were just more questions about how this would play out and what was needed to come to the table. So we saw the ordinance come back in October, November, December, and ultimately the city said, we need to do some public engagement. And I think what we really heard around the horseshoe yesterday was the amazing work that happened through this public engagement, and how this is a model on how the city should be working with community, should be listening to the stakeholders, to tenants and property owners alike, and really understanding the lived experience. I think that's what we learned through this year-long process, illuminating how the lived experience is really addressing and answering our questions as how the regulations and the rules that are written into the ordinance and the policies that the city does, how that plays out. So it was unanimously passed yesterday. And I think that that really shows the support of the quality of life and affordable housing and healthy housing that we need, and the commitment to that. So I'm really excited to see this move forward.
Looking forward, what's next? Do you think it's something else that needs to be passed or implemented when it comes to the city and as far as the affordable housing goes, or housing safety?
Yeah, so one of the things that was created through this ordinance is the ASEC, which stands for the Apartment Standards Enforcement Committee. And I think what this is doing is they're just going to be able to start getting to work. These are 11 people that come from these different departments: the police department, public works, fire, the health department, the housing and community development department, solid waste. A property owner will be on the ASEC, a tenant will be on the ASEC, and a representative of the mayor's office. So all of these folks will be sitting around a round table and really talking. And I think that's what we've been hearing from the departments and the city councilors alike, that there has been, not to say a miscommunication or lack of communication, but barriers to this coordinated work. And so the ordinance is going to allow more coordination, and I think that's what this pilot program is going to allow us to see. So they're going to start being able to communicate with each other, and hopefully in this year process, they're just going to find this coordination and this ease into supporting property owners and getting tenants into healthy housing.
Julia Orduña is the Southeast Regional Director for Texas Housers. Julia, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Just ahead, what the forecast for hurricane season says and how often it really plays out that way. Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and on YouTube.
Support for Houston Public Media comes.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8, a night of mystery and intrigue with Father Brown at 7. Followed by the Sister Boniface Mysteries at 8 and Death in Paradise at 9. Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, and today for Craig Cohen. In just 25 days, another Atlantic hurricane season begins. That time of year where we Houstonians and everyone along the Gulf Coast keep an eye on weather happening a few thousand miles away, and also its potential to turn into something problematic for us. Some forecasts are already out regarding what may lie ahead for hurricane season, and we're going to take a closer look now at one set of predictions and learn how they get made with the help of Dr. Phil Klotzbach, who's a senior research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University, which released its annual forecast last month. Dr. Klotzbach, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thanks so much for having me. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. We welcome your questions or comments about the forecast for hurricane season and how those get made at 713-440-8870. You can also text that number, or you can email talk@houstonmatters.org, or plenty of people have been commenting on our live stream on the Houston Public Media YouTube channel. So, Dr. Klotzbach, how many named storms do you expect this season?
Yeah, so we're forecasting a somewhat below normal hurricane season this year. So we're forecasting a total of 13 named storms. So named storms are any system named by the National Hurricane Center, so all tropical storms and hurricanes. Of those 13, 6 becoming hurricanes, and of those 6, 2 becoming major Category 3, 4, 5 hurricanes, hurricanes with winds of 111 miles per hour or greater. For comparison, an average season has 14, 7, and 3, so one fewer named storm, hurricane, and major hurricane this year.
So what kinds of weather factors or patterns happening this year are playing into that?
Yeah, so our seasonal forecast, we've been doing these all the way since 1984. So this is the start of our 43rd year of doing seasonal hurricane predictions at Colorado State. One of the primary factors that we use this year and we use every year is, what is the state of El Nino and La Nina? And so El Nino is warmer than normal water in the central and eastern tropical Pacific. La Nina is colder than normal water in that same region. This year, it's looking very likely that we're going to have El Nino conditions and potentially a pretty strong El Nino. When you have those really warm waters in the eastern and central tropical Pacific Ocean, what that does is it tends to shift to where the thunderstorms form in the Pacific from near Indonesia farther to the east. In response, that does is increases winds high up in the atmosphere, say 25, 30,000 feet out of the west in the Atlantic. And that increases levels of vertical wind shear. And vertical wind shear is good for us, bad for the hurricane. Basically, when you have winds at one level going out of one direction, so in the Atlantic, high up in the atmosphere, they go out of the west. Low levels near the ocean surface, they blow out of the east. Too much of that vertical wind shear tears apart hurricanes. It tends to tilt the circulation, mix in dry air. So again, good for us, bad for the hurricanes when you have lots of wind shear. And it looks like, given the robustness of this El Nino that's likely coming our way, probably going to see significantly elevated vertical wind shear across the tropical Atlantic and Caribbean this year.
Okay. And what are some of the factors that you and your fellow researchers look at in the data? How do you compile and come up with these forecasts?
Yeah, so we use a variety of different techniques. So, basically kind of the way that the seasonal forecast got started was looking for precursor signals. So basically, what sets of climate conditions historically have preceded busy seasons, and alternatively, what sets have preceded quiet seasons. Now, if say there was no, basically if you looked at every busy season had different sets of conditions preceding it, you would say, hey, we just can't forecast it. But there does tend to be one set prior to busy seasons, one set prior to quiet seasons. So we've already talked about El Nino and La Nina. Another big factor is how warm are water temperatures in the tropical Atlantic. When those are warmer than normal, that tends to basically hurricanes live off that warm ocean water. So more of that warm ocean water provides more fuel for developing tropical storms and hurricanes. It also tends to be associated with lower pressures and a more unstable atmosphere, both of which favor hurricane activity. In addition, things that we also monitor include, what is the state of the West African monsoon? So basically, why the monsoon over West Africa matters is that these hurricanes tend to form what we call African easterly waves, which are strong strong thunderstorm complexes that move off the coast of Africa about every 3 to 5 days during the hurricane season. Most of these, thankfully, don't form into tropical storms and hurricanes, but when those strong thunderstorm complexes are stronger than normal, they're very well organized, that tends to be associated with busier hurricane seasons as well. So these are just a variety of the different conditions that we look at to monitor hurricane seasons, in addition to kind of looking at what's come up to, say, today's date. So, in this case, we're talking early May. We also now look at climate model forecasts. So these climate models will forecast things like El Nino, wind shear, water temperatures out 3 to 6 months in the future. And they do it with reasonably good skill in the tropics. And in this case, we're not saying, give me the forecast for July 12th in Denver. What we're looking at is, say, a 1 to 3 month average temperature forecast of, say, water temperatures in the Atlantic and in the Pacific and wind shear. And the models do a reasonably good job of this, especially in the deep tropics, which is where our focus is, because that's obviously where the hurricanes are.
As the season actually then begins to play out, are there factors or things that can happen that change the forecast, and do you revise the forecast as the year plays out?
That's correct. We do update the forecast. So the first forecast came out, as you mentioned, on April the 9th. We'll update it on June the 10th, an additional update on the 9th of July, and a final update on the 6th of August. And sometimes people say, well, hey, the 6th of August, hurricane season starts June 1st. You're 2 months into the hurricane season, and that's true, you are. But the Atlantic hurricane season is extremely peaked. It really doesn't ramp up until you get to August. About 95% of your major hurricane activity historically occurs after the 1st of August. And so that's why we do these updates, because we're closer to the events that we're trying to predict. And honestly, the month of July gives us a lot of information. Typically, July doesn't necessarily have much in the way of storm activity, but the tropical atmosphere really tends to kind of lock into whatever environment it's going to be in during July. And so if, say, the shear is low in July, it tends to be low in August, September, and October. So July gives us a lot of really valuable clues as to what the peak of the season is going to look like. So yes, we do update these forecasts. And typically, if you look at the skill of these forecasts, it does improve from April to June to July to August, again, just because we're closer to the events that we're trying to predict.
Yeah, people in Houston will remember very well, of course, plenty of our storms, Harvey in August and Ike in September. And of course, it was sort of unusual about Beryl a couple of years ago that it happened in early July. At the end of the season, do you and your colleagues look back and sort of judge the season and say how accurate we are, and how accurate does it tend to be?
Yeah, so we definitely do. So we do, if you go to our website, there is extensive documentation, each of our forecasts. So you may hear the numbers that come out with the forecast, but there's a lot of what we think is good science that goes into these forecasts. We have extensive documentation of why we're predicting what we are. And then at the end of each season, we do quite an extensive verification as well, talking about, what happened during the season, kind of what the physics were of the season, and then, how good or bad the seasonal forecasts were. We do extensive verification, and we look back at all of our historical seasons as well. So, obviously our techniques have changed since 1984 when they got started, hopefully for the better. Typically the skill of the April forecast, I would characterize as modest, and that's just because, again, we're still several months from when the season really ramps up in August. As you get closer, the skill of the forecast gets better. So if you look historically, the skill of the forecast, there's a lot of ways you can look at it, but say for the number of hurricanes, in say July and August, and even in June, it's about +or-2. So, say we forecast 8 hurricanes, you would expect it to be somewhere between 6 and 10. In April, it's more like +or-3, and that's, again, just because there's a lot of still uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially with El Nino and La Nina. While we're pretty confident this year El Nino is coming, there is a lot of uncertainty in those El Nino conditions that occurs, especially during April and May. By the time we get to June, we're a lot more confident as to what El Nino is going to look like.
Dr. Phil Klotzbach is a senior research scientist in the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University, which has released its annual forecast for the hurricane season. Dr. Klotzbach, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty filling in for Craig Cohen, and we're talking about the forecast for this year's hurricane season. Now we want to zero in a little closer on the Houston-Galveston region and get some perspectives of a meteorologist who's been studying our area's weather more acutely over the years. We often turn to Eric Berger of Space City Weather for just that. Eric, thanks for coming by again.
Well, good morning, Michael.
Glad to have you. First, I imagine you've looked at the Colorado State forecast. What stands out to you?
Every year. I mean, I checked the Colorado State forecast before coming on the air this morning. It's not surprising to me what they're predicting, given the atmospheric setup. In the past couple of years, we've had some seasons where we've had La Nina conditions and very, very warm waters in the Atlantic. And so those were expectations for a very, very busy season. This year, the conditions are much more muted, so hopefully we will see a quieter than normal year in the Atlantic.
Are there other forecasts you tend to look at throughout the season, and when can we expect to see those?
The European model does a very good seasonal forecast that comes out on a monthly basis, sort of predicting overall conditions for activity, and they're continuing to show supportive evidence for below normal season. The reality is that, Michael, there's only so much data you can look at several months before the heart of hurricane season to give you confidence. And so, when you don't see like blistering hot temperatures in the Atlantic and you see a burgeoning El Nino, you feel pretty good. That's about, at this time in the 2020s, that's about as good a position as you could be in.
Yeah, for what you do, you're often reporting on weather patterns, things that are happening more acutely, closer to the date, today, tomorrow, next week.
Michael, I can't even tell you if it's going to rain Saturday, so I'm a little hesitant to forecast hurricane activity in August.
What's it going to do in September? Yeah. What do you do with this information when these forecasts come out? You just kind of file it away as good background information, or what?
Yeah, it's always good. I appreciate the scientific rigor that goes into these forecasting efforts, and especially the transparency. Colorado State publishes a detailed sort of analysis every year of what it got right and wrong about a hurricane season, and is trying to sort of improve the science of seasonal forecast prediction. I do think there's limited value. The reality is that it's totally a cliche, but it just takes one storm during a season to make it for a bad hurricane season somewhere. And so that's the reality. It's interesting information to know. The public is obviously very interested, but in terms of your preparations and sort of my day-to-day activities, it doesn't change very much.
Yeah, imagine. The forecast is looking at the Atlantic, and the Gulf Coast. It's a huge region that may be affected. But we look at Houston. How often do these forecasts do you think actually play out like they are made out several months ahead?
They're pretty good. They give you a good sense of what to expect going into a season. And last year there were expectations of a very busy season in the Atlantic, and for a while there it looked like kind of a bust, and certainly for the Gulf of Mexico, especially Texas, it absolutely was a bust. Very thankfully and happily, we had no threats at all from the tropics last year in Texas, and particularly in Houston. It was an extremely quiet year, but if you look more broadly out in the Caribbean, Jamaica got hit by a major hurricane, and in the open Atlantic there were lots of powerful long-lived storms. They just fortunately did not come toward the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, there's still a lot of kind of incidental factors that play into whether, even if it is a very busy storm year, will one actually turn and come into the Gulf, and will it turn into Houston?
There is some science to suggest that during La Nina years that storms are a little more likely to come into the Gulf of Mexico, but a lot of that science is really kind of on the edge, and so I don't feel super confident about saying one way or another. The predictive value of where storms will go in a season, especially in April or May, is just not very high.
Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on and talking to Eric throughout the season, I imagine, as we see the weather unfold a little more acutely. Eric Berger is a meteorologist for Space City Weather. Eric, thanks as always.
Thank you.
Just ahead, understanding Tourette Syndrome, which is the subject of a film that recently wrapped a run of screenings here in Houston. That's just ahead as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
including flower arrangements, brunch staples, seafood, wines, and more. Ideas at centralmarket.com.
From the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, presenting Buddha, Nature. 5 dialogues on our shared world, illuminating the ecological and ethical questions through art. On view through May 10th. Details at mfah.org.
77 for the high. Chance of rain in the next couple of days. 66 right now. Morning conditions.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty. Back in February, what was meant to be a celebration of 2025 in film by the British Academy of Film and Television Arts was marred by an awkward incident during the annual BAFTA Awards ceremony. During a presentation by actors Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, a man with Tourette Syndrome in the audience shouted out a racial slur that was audible on the broadcast. And while the show continued, despite that interruption, the moment sparked a great deal of controversy afterwards. The man who shouted the slur was John Davidson, an advocate for Tourette Syndrome, whose life is dramatized in the film I Swear, which won 2 awards at that same BAFTA ceremony. Houston Matters producer Joshua Zinn set out to learn more about Tourette Syndrome and what we should take away from the BAFTA incident in this installment of The Bigger Picture.
Johnny D! It's called Tourette Syndrome. Say things that I shouldn't. What can you do? Do you want to come in for something to eat, John? Off, you wank.
Well, it's nice to meet you too.
Sorry.
My name is Cheryl Cadman. I work for the Tourette Syndrome Association, and I am the executive director for the state. I'm also the mother of 2 children with Tourette and some grandchildren as well.
Jamie Blasingame. I'm a school psychologist here in the Houston area, Conroe. And I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome in my early 20s, probably when I was 22, which is kind of late for a diagnosis. And then I went on to have brain surgery for deep brain stimulator for Tourette syndrome. And I also run a support group out of the Woodlands.
Cheryl, let's start with the basics, just because a lot of people have probably heard of Tourette's and maybe have a vague sense of what it is. But can you maybe go more in depth into what Tourette syndrome actually is and what it entails for the person who's dealing with it?
Okay. Well, Tourette syndrome is a syndrome, which means it's a collection of symptoms. The hallmark symptoms are called tics, which are involuntary movements and noises. So a person to be diagnosed with Tourette must have both a motor and a vocal tic, that is to make a noise and a movement, have the symptoms come and go, and be present for more than 1 year. It usually begins in childhood. Like Jamie said, hers was late diagnosed, but it was earlier onset. She just didn't know what she had all those years, which is a big problem because even in this day and age, Tourette is greatly misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and underdiagnosed all over the country. We have a group of kids that are very, very bright, very misunderstood, don't do well in school because they're not diagnosed and given the appropriate tools to be successful. And so as an organization, we focus very, very heavily in the schools to help the kids get what they need so they can have a normal, fulfilling adult life.
So, Jamie, as somebody who has experienced this, I mean, what has your experience been like with Tourette syndrome?
As a kid, it didn't even really impact me. It was things like biting my nose. I had a severe stutter. I had a really bad spitting tic. I didn't know it was a tic. My mom just was like, that's a really bad, horrible habit. Young ladies shouldn't do things like that. Pop my knuckles constantly. Then as I got older in my 20s, maybe 20, 21, after I had graduated college, I woke up one morning with this horrible neck tic, and it really just changed my life from there. And it got worse and worse and worse. As an adult, it was hard because you feel the embarrassment, the shame, people laughing, grown adults laughing, be in public. And as I got older, my tics got worse and worse. So it was just constant body movements. I had, well, I guess I'm assuming we'll talk about coprolalia. So very inappropriate words or phrases that I would say. And then I would flip people off. And that was very unpleasant when you work in the school system. We went through lots of different avenues, medication, Botox, and ultimately none of it worked. And so we went the route of doing deep brain stimulation, and it totally changed my life.
What did that feel like? What did it feel like with that lack of inhibition? Was it something you were even registering at all in your head?
So there's times I think you feel like an urge. We often describe it as people who want to sneeze or that need to sneeze. And then if you try to hold it in, eventually you have to sneeze. Well, that's what it's like with Tourette's. Eventually the tick has to come out. I know there's some therapies and things like that where we teach kids to suppress it, and then it's like they get home and it just kind of explodes. And so all the ticks come out, anxiety, they're tired, they're exhausted. And we see school-age children deal with that as well.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I think I just had to get it out in the car earlier, like when it all builds up.
Yeah. She's pretty good at suppressing your tics then.
Sometimes it just depends on how the day's going,
The hospital send people to me every now and again, But to be honest, I'm not really sure how much I help them.
I thought that you were like some sort of specialist doing my dad's going.
No, I'm a specialist, but I've read a bit.
Yeah. You're the first person I've met with Tourette's.
And I know when I was in my 20s, I dealt with that a lot because at my job, that just wasn't appropriate to have some of those tics. So I would hold it in as much as I could. I would release it in my office with my door shut, or I would wait till I got home and it was just an explosion of tics. So there's also other times where I don't even feel it coming on and it just happens. Yeah. And so oftentimes there's urges, and then there's times where it just occurs.
So the reason I wanted to have this conversation, of course, is there's a new film out about John Davidson, a Scottish man who famously suffers from Tourette's as well. He was actually featured in a couple of documentaries, and then they made this film kind of dramatizing his life a little bit, but kind of showing the struggles he went through as a young man in school and then into his life as an adult. He had issues holding down jobs. He had issues with, social, being out in public and saying really inappropriate things that get him into trouble. So I'm just curious, as people who have been in this world, been around this condition for so long, what did you make of this film and how it depicted Tourette syndrome?
I thought it was incredibly moving, very realistic. I mean, I thought the movie, and we had a private screening here. People were very, very moved and very hopeful that people would be talking about Tourette like we are today, and that it would impart a greater understanding and sensitivity. I mean, most people that have Tourette are in the mild to moderate range. There are 15% or less that are in that severe coprolalic as adults. But it's the most sensational. And so for those, we need to teach better and spread more awareness. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And
I feel like it was probably the best movie that depicted Tourette syndrome. There's probably a lot of movies out there. I just don't think they depicted as well as this one did, because it was about his life and how it impacted him, and early on and all the way up into adulthood. And it was very moving. And I actually saw myself in that movie multiple times. There's a scene in the movie where he is eating and spits the food out multiple times when he's with his family and once when he's with his teacher. And I grew up spitting, and I, even in my 20s and 30s, had a spitting tick. Didn't know that's what it was. And then there's another scene where I think he got assaulted, and they have to put him on a stretcher. And then, on a stretcher, they have like a seatbelt, and they kind of restraint. Thank you. Restrained him, and they did it also in the hospital. There's like that, almost like an overwhelming urge when you're in that type of restraint to tick more. And I've been in that situation where I was taken to the hospital. I was in an ambulance, and I could not stop ticking. It made it worse and worse and worse. And so there were several scenes where I really felt my life depicted in those moments. It was very realistic, and the actor did a phenomenal job, both the young actor and the adult actor as well. Very, very well made movie.
Because we're talking about this movie, we also inevitably have to talk about the BAFTAs and the incident that happened this past February when actors Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan, who are both Black, were on stage presenting. The real John Davidson, the man who the movie is about, was in attendance at the ceremony, and he shouted out a racial slur because of his Tourette syndrome. And of course, it was a pretty uncomfortable moment in real time, and I think they kind of tried to talk to folks about it, but people weren't really satisfied with the explanation. And then there just became this whole controversy over this because we're kind of dealing with two opposing issues here. One, we're dealing with Tourette syndrome, which, has its own stuff, but we're also dealing with a race issue, which can be very sensitive and very challenging. I'm curious what you made of the discussion about Tourette's after this particular incident happened.
We, as an organization, started getting calls from the media, but more concerning was from the people we serve, especially the college kids that were saying, we're getting these horrible messages on our Facebook page that people with Tourette should be dead, they don't have a right to live, they shouldn't be saying, they shouldn't be allowed in public. So, which generated statements on coprolalia, and, there were interviews on TV too about coprolalia. I mean, clearly we need more education and understanding. And the other thing to know about coprolalia is it is situationally triggered. So if someone is in a movie theater, they're not going to shout a racial slur. They're going to say fire. If they're in the airport, they're going to scream bomb or hijack. If they're in a church, they're going to scream something blasphemous. So it's situationally triggered. So your brain is actually saying, okay, you're in church. Say the worst thing you could possibly say with no processing and no thought. Mm-hmm. We know it happens situationally. We know that it's neurophysiological. We know that it's involuntary. But how do we know that somehow, somewhere, there isn't something in a person that makes them say these awful things? And so the best way I can explain that is that we all have words that are not comfortable for us, or bad words that we know in our vocabulary. We all know bad language. We all know blasphemous words. We know the word retard. We know the word slut. We can't help it but know what's around us. But just because you know the word retard, does that mean you don't like people that are developmentally disabled? Because you have a racial slur, does that mean you hate Black people or people of color? Just because you know blasphemous words, does that mean you're not a person of God? So the answer to all that is no. It isn't. Just because you know the words doesn't mean there's a deep-seated anything. And so I would say that as long as the person knows the word and it's socially inappropriate, it's going to be expressed. But he, clearly didn't mean to and didn't want to. And then you think the why of it. Why would anyone want to say that word, or any word that's coprolalic? They're kicked out of theaters, schools, scouts, churches, public transportation, and not to mention assaulted and arrested too.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That I will tell the truth.
That I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
No, I won't. That I will tell the truth.
Can someone explain the reason for this contempt?
My lord, if I may, Mr. Davidson on occasion shouts things uncontrollably. Impulsive comments, he neither means them or can control them. Sexist, homophobic, misogynist.
Don't forget racist, you
And racist. Based on personal experience, I can assure you he is well versed in all manner of racist comments, many of which not even I have encountered, but all completely out of his control.
Jamie, any additional thoughts on that as somebody who has dealt with this?
Thoughts on the baptism, especially the comments that came after, and a lot of the comments were, why did he even go if he knew that was one of the words that might be triggered? If a lot of it was about inclusivity, and I believe people with coprolalia can't be included, and that was something that really didn't sit well with me, is that it was, why didn't he just say home? But I think what people miss is that coprolalia, we don't get a chance to change the words. They just come and I remember very first time I ever said the F word, I was with my mother, who I'd never said the word before, and we were going into Hobby Lobby, and it came out of nowhere, and my mom turned, and it was just like this flush of, like, her face just turned red, and I know it was. And so then the explaining of that and where do we go from here? And it was horrifying. So I had never said the F word prior to that. And I was in my 20s. I used to use a racial slur, and I had never in my life, I would never now use that word. It's not something, we don't choose that. It's also not something that's intentional. It's not how I believe. It's not my belief, but people are, it's a misunderstanding. It's a misinterpretation of who we are as a person, which is unfortunate because we don't choose to say those words.
Yeah, because do you think how long you stayed home from church?
I didn't go to church for over a year. I'm a churchgoer and didn't. So literally when people would say amen or something of the sort, F you or something along those lines would come out of my mouth at church. And The church worked with me amazingly. I won't say anything negative about them. It just, I personally didn't feel comfortable going because who wants to sit next to someone screaming out the F word? It's humiliating. It's embarrassing.
It is.
Very uncomfortable. And I think people just, it's the judgment that comes after and nothing we can do to fix it. So,
Yeah. So I know that you've just come back from Tourette's camp and talking with a lot of people who have dealt with this. I would assume younger folks who are dealing with this. Jamie, is somebody who has gone through this and is now living a functional adult life, what kind of wisdom do you hope to impart to these young people who
it's funny you say that, because that's been kind of a hot topic the last probably 5 or 6 months. Is there is hope for these children. I think advocating and educating is huge at such a young age. The kids come starting at age 5 if they have the diagnosis and they want to come, and letting them know that like there are other people in the community that are like them, that have, similar tics and symptoms, and letting them know that. And that a lot of the counselors, I would say most of the counselors also have Tourette syndrome. They're living fully functional life. We have coaches, teachers. I'm a school psychologist. We have doctors and attorneys, and there is hope.
Rocket scientists. I mean,
yes.
All walks of life.
We heard there from Cheryl Cadman, Executive Director of Tourette Texas, and Jamie Blassingame, a local educator and Tourette syndrome activist. They spoke with Houston Matters producer Joshua Zinn. Still to come, we preview the Houston debut of Panda Fest, a large outdoor Asian food and culture festival. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
About a year ago, the Devil's Hole.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
With executive leadership to create expert internal and external communication strategy. Elmore. Listen, clarify, communicate. More at elmorepr.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
More than 650,000 Houstonians are categorized as Asian, either from Asia or of Asian descent. They represent 9% of the region's population. That's according to Rice University's Kinder Institute for Urban Research. So perhaps it's no surprise that a nationwide festival touting itself as a cultural journey through Asia is now coming to Houston. Panda Fest makes its Houston debut this weekend at the Waterworks in Buffalo Bayou Park. Here with more is a member of the Panda Fest team, Lucy Zhang. Lucy, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thank you.
What exactly is Panda Fest? I imagine there's plenty of people not familiar since it's new to Houston.
Yes, so Panda Fest, obviously we're in Panda theme, and we're hosting in the Buffalo Bayou Park this weekend, and we're having 60 food vendors and merchandise vendors are in Panda theme. So you can discover all kinds of Asian food in our festival. For example, from the dessert part, you will see bingsu, you will see taiyaki, and so many other delicious sweet. And also for the appetizer part, you will see the takoyaki, you will see the taco sushi, and so many little bite. And you will see a lot of great seasoned Asian signature street food, for example, king squid barbecue, the Mongolian barbecue, and the bao, the dumpling, the dim sum, so many.
Oh, man. All sounds so great. Any cultural festival, of course, there's so much great food. And that's one way to learn about different cultures for sure, a great entryway. What other activities and things go on besides food?
Of course. So we also have a 15 feet large panda inflatable, and in the shape of our pin designed for Houston.
And that's those of you on YouTube can see we got lots of panda swag here, but this is a panda astronaut with a space shuttle. That's going to be an inflatable that kids can like slide down or whatever?
It's a huge panda inflatable. You can take picture.
okay.
And then we also, for everyone will get a free pin, so it's collectible, and you will get a free inflatable headband for you. And then besides all this panda theme, we also have the culture platform, the traditional way and the modern way. So you will see Beijing opera. That is the first time I'm gonna ever sing in the United States. I'm so excited as well. And then we have the Kung Fu. We have the K-pop. We have the traditional dance. Everything will be up there. And the lion dance, yes.
Oh, yeah. So lots of demonstrations of different cultural aspects from different countries. I mean, there are a lot of countries that you can kind of fit under the umbrella of Asia from, different parts. But, I mean, what are some of the countries, I guess, that are being highlighted in this?
Yeah, sure. So besides Chinese food, Japanese food, Korean food, we also have Thai food. We also have Indonesian food and Lao food, so many other food, and Indian food as well. So we are trying to grab as different as possible.
Yeah, that's quite a range there. I know that, so what are some other your favorite activities that people can do, participate in? I know there's like calligraphy and different things that people can do.
Yeah, of course. We also have the face painting for the kids, and we also have the photo booth so people can take memorable pictures together. And I think one of the most important thing is like when you're trying different kind of food, food that is new, and you're sharing the food, you're sharing the love, you're asking questions, you're talking about the culture. That's how we are trying to do for Panda Fest. And especially in this city, it's very important because we have such a different, diverse demographic. And especially this month is AAPI month.
Yeah, good fitting coincidence there. As you mentioned, I mean, the festival takes place in lots of cities around the U.S. Why did it get started? Why was this created?
Yeah, so we started in 2023, and then our founder, Biu Shi, her favorite animal is panda, and we love panda because it's always fluffy and very cute, and it's a very cute symbolize for sharing the love and peace together. And we think that is a perfect animal and symbolize. So we choose panda, and then we already done 20 events in 13 cities. So Houston, this space city, it's gonna be our 14th city. We're so excited.
Oh, wow. Why did you guys decide that Houston was made sense as a place to add to that list?
Yeah, so we done Dallas and Austin last year, and we had a great turnout. And we just say Houston, that is the city we cannot miss out as well. So we came back for Texas, and Houston is our pick.
I'll try not to take it personally that you went to Dallas and Austin first. Ouch. This is, other than just all the fun and the food and all that stuff, the Instagrammable moments and all those things. I mean, why do you feel like an event like this is important in sharing and spreading the knowledge and awareness of Asian culture?
Yes, for sure. So as the first employee, when Bibi telling me she's like building a platform called Panda Fest and traveling around the cities to share the culture, I was like, okay. And then more I connect, the more I build, the more I do, I feel more in deep that the food is just, the first connection, the one to break everything. It's still building bridge. But what is more important is about after the food, like after this little title, people will learn more about the culture by having fun time, by having, by seeing, by this visible and connection together. And then that's how we can like build everything step by step, and then how we can like let people learn by this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Panda Fest makes its debut in Houston Friday through Sunday at the Waterworks in Buffalo Bayou Park. Lucy Zhang is part of the team putting it all together. Lucy, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that does it for this edition of Houston Matters. Our team includes Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll is our technical director. On tomorrow's show, we'll break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week, as we always do on Fridays. And imagine if Shakespeare's Hamlet was a comedy set at a Southern barbecue. We'll learn about a local production of the Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Fat Ham. I'm Michael Haggerty. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
Jennifer Wilson moved to Croatia to see if her ancestral roots could strengthen her own young family.
It was really like hitting the reset button for our family there.
While Mary Baron is finding all of Paris likes to lend a helpful opinion or two on how she's raising her child.
Oh, madame, look at these poor babies' arms. You've exposed them to the wind.
Raising your family overseas. It's on the next travel with Rick Steves.